Camiba Gallery and to our exhibit, Colors, Form, and Sin by Edward Lane McCartney. And today we have Edward in the gallery. He's going to be talking about the exhibit with us, talking about sort of his background and a little bit about each one of the artworks. Edward's been doing art for a little over 20 years now.
About 20 years.
Yeah, about 20 years. And what's really interesting about the title of the exhibit is it ties into sort of some of your passions or some of the things that you really focus on in your art making practice. Do you want to dive into that?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, it does. Of course, I think some of the things that artists always sort of deal with are forms and colors, and they're basic things. But about 10 years ago, I took this seminar class with a South American artist, Carlos Cruz Diaz, and it really sort of changed the way I look at color and the way color is perceived by the viewer. The way the juxtapositions of colors next to each other create other colors, and so there's a certain there's something to do with your perception of reality and what's real and what is perceived, and I like those sort of ideas. And so so color is very important in my work. I like color personally. I like to wear color. I think color is fun. If you can have color, why not?
Right.
If your choices are black, white, and color, have color. And then I work in a lot of different forms or formats. I started off as an art jeweler, making jewelry forms and forms for the body, and I always thought of the body as a canvas, as a gallery wall to put an ornament on. And as I wanted to say things that had more content, my jewelry sort of left the sight of the body. And in fact, in my very first solo show of sculpture, unintentionally or maybe intentionally or subconsciously, all the work was large jewelry forms.
Oh.
Really large. I mean, they were giant necklaces and giant brooches, and it's like, oh, okay, yeah. that's what happened.
That's where we're going. Yeah, all right.
So, yeah.
Okay.
So.
And then the scent?
So, I grew up in a family that was, my father was Baptist, my mother was Episcopalian, and they were always in a search for a happy medium. And we lived overseas, and I sang in an all-boys Anglican church choir for many years. And I really loved the liturgical ritual. And I enjoy ritual in general. I like making ritual objects. And so I've, like the pieces, the 7 Deadly Sins that I made for this show is a theme that I have visited before. And I did a series of the 7 Deadly Sins as cutlery pieces.
Oh, yeah.
They all had a function for the table. I've always thought of tableware as sort of a ritualistic experience. So all of those ideas from liturgical pieces and religious ideas and dogma, and they come into my work at times, and I like to explore those now and then.
Okay. And so in this show, we could break things down into each one of those categories.
Sure.
But and we've done that for the catalog. So the catalog actually, I forced things to go into one of these categories because some of them can fit into multiple.
Sure.
Right. And I think this piece, Articulation, is an example of something that goes into all three. And I don't know if you've thought about the sin element of it, but I mean, it could be seen as a sin
There's
element.
an addictive quality to this.
Yes, exactly. So, will you talk about this piece?
So, yes. One of the things that I like to do in my work is I like to appropriate things, and I like to use things. I like to collect trash. I love when they have heavy trash day. I can pick things up on the street. But this literally started out as because I quit smoking in 2017, but I went for a nicotine replacement pouch that has no tobacco. It's just nicotine. And I had all these these containers that the product comes in. I couldn't stand to throw them away. So
this is a result of your addiction.
it's a result.
Which is fine.
And so I thought, well, I'll string them together and in a colorful way, and it's a form that is reminiscent of a necklace, of a jewelry form. So I do come back to that often.
Yeah.
But beyond that, it's just a great sculptural form, and you can lay it on the floor, you can hang it freestanding in a room. You could do so much with it. I like work that is not static. That there's something that you can experience about it again and again in a different way. That's sort of one of the things that I've been thinking about is sort of art as experience. And even with the paper pieces, sometimes if you move from one side to the other, you see the color in a different way. So that's something that I'm also interested in.
And I love, like again, you said it's like it's a necklace form, just on a giant scale. And I like, if actually you end up looking at this in detail over here, you can actually connect them.
You could.
You could.
Yeah,
you could connect it like a necklace if there was a giant wanted to wear it.
Right.
You could really get that done. But I also really enjoy that you let me curate. You brought it in. And you're like, okay, and you can pull it on the floor. You can do what you want to do with it, and that's sort of the fun for me as a curator to be able to take this form and say, oh wow, how can we have fun with this?
Over the years, people have asked, about selling your work and how do you let go of it? And it's like, well, I've had the experience of making it, and that's my thing. That's my input. The object is to go away, and so I like the person who receives it to be able to do things with it, whatever they want with it, really. Then they may think of things I never thought of to do with it, and I think that's great. And I certainly have trust, in you when you were asking me how do you want this all displayed, and it's like, any way you wish. It's not that I can do that, and sometimes I will have a show in a gallery, and I will know where every piece is going on the wall before it ever arrives at the gallery, because I will do a three-dimensional CAD drawing and place the art in it. So it's not that I don't have that capability, but I like. I'm glad for others to have that experience.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So when we're talking about the movement, the pieces that you like, the pieces that have movement in them, and again, this comes next for me. It's Confetti is the title of the piece, and you're calling it a wall mobile.
Yeah.
And you do have brackets that would hold it, 6 inches or so off the wall. But I really wanted to get some depth to it. Again, you let me have some leeway with this, But this is a collection of objects as well, and so it's a play on form, it's a play on color, and it's a play on sort of reflection and how the colors interact with each other. What's up with these pieces?
I'm so glad I went with translucent.
Yeah.
Because at some point, I was thinking opaques, and so in my studio I collect a lot of things, and I have them in jars on shelves, and they're all sorted by color, and I have lots of materials from one project to the next project, and I literally just started making these metallic jump rings and placing bits of colored plastic and vinyl on them to sort of create this curtain effect. And it makes noise, which is also kind of nice. And light does wonderful things off of it. I had it on a wall in my studio because that's the area that I had to work with, and I kept thinking the whole time it would be great in front of the window. Maybe it has a stained glass quality also. That may play into it a bit as well. A lot of the material is just collected from my studio from past projects. It's very labor intensive. There are thousands of metal rings, and that, each piece is cut and drilled. So maybe that's 2 or 3 processes per piece, per thousands. So, it takes a lot of time. I enjoy that part of the process of making. If anyone has ever knitted, crocheted, needle pointed, there's sort of a meditative quality that you get. And I think that when I'm making a piece, it sort of frees your mind to think about other things, and I'm usually thinking about where I can go next with the next piece. There's some hand memory that takes over. If you play a musical instrument, you'll know that there's some muscle memory in your hands. And when you start going, suddenly your hands are doing this, your eyes making decisions on where to put something. And it sort of, I say it sort of cuts out the noise around you, and you can focus. And there's no greater day in my studio when I start at a certain time and I look up and 6 or 7 hours have disappeared and it doesn't feel like it. And that's the best.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I want to point out one other thing about this piece is the shadows that are just, so amazing. So throughout the day they change as the light that comes in here changes. And so they're colored as well. So it's like this really contrasty black shadowing effect with colored shadows. And I love that. And then as the light changes again throughout the day, the sun gets a little more intense and you get reflections back down on the floor from the front side too. So you're getting both. You're getting both sides of it. So I love that.
One of my favorite photographs I took while I was in here was a side view of this of that wall. And I like it. It's almost disappeared on that side. I had never seen it that way.
Just like a line.
Super line.
Right, it's just like this line right here. And then I've got my installation centered on these on that side.
I thought that was very good.
Thank you. So going from the wall mobiles, we've got another one over here that plays off of your background in design and metalwork. And
so I've done architectural drafting. I did engineering drafting in junior high and high school. And then after college, I went to the Art Institute of Houston and did architectural drafting. And then I did architectural drafting professionally forever until maybe 10 years ago when I stopped entirely. And I always did it the old-fashioned way with the pencil and the parallel bar. But those are a lot of my drafting tools and the idea of measuring and quantifying. I have a penchant for yard sales, and I love to pick up yardsticks and old rulers and things that have a patina and some age. And I like sort of, it's a nice little homage all put together there.
Somebody asked me this week, and I didn't know the answer to if there was any significance to the letters, or if that was just just random. Okay. That was, again, with the idea of the categorizing, but there's nothing significant to
not
where
specific.
they came from or anything like that. Yeah. And then this little challenge right here.
Okay. So when you spoke with me about the show, the whole show was going to be mobiles. Yeah. And I wanted to go there. And then I made my first mobile. And I thought, not so easy.
Done.
And they're very challenging, and I was trying to do something that I had not really seen before, in that most mobiles hang and they come down in stages, and I was trying to make the mobile go up in stages. And so to keep the upper arms from tilting forward, every time you went up a tier, the bottom weight had to change progressively. And even in this small sculpture, if I lift it up just a tiny amount, it will collapse. Because it's held with the tension, and it falls apart. But it's a wonderful idea about equilibrium and balance, and
I love it.
you can read into that all you want to. Terribly fun to make, as well as frustrating, but very fun to make.
Now you're interested in doing another one, right?
I am.
Now that you got over the pain of the creation.
Actually, I didn't like it for a while
Uh-huh.
because it was difficult, and then I actually think it might be my favorite piece of it. There's something I just think really nice about it.
Yeah, it's elegant.
Yeah.
Challenging.
Yeah.
And mentally challenging too. Like if you start looking at it, trying to think of how those things are balanced, you're just like, what? How is that happening?
Yeah.
Like that thing's floating up in the top. So, yeah, I love that piece. I love it. So we'll I guess we've got several what you call line drawings.
So, a line is a gesture. Artists draw, and I draw, but I draw mechanically. And I've never been a painter or a sketcher very much. And so I like the idea of drawing three-dimensionally in space with metal lines. And so I think of these as gestures of movement. It feels like this could be tumbling up into space. There's a bit of a gesture there. This goes back to a wearable form, and I can actually put it on my hand. I have worn it as a bracelet, but I also love it as an object. And they're made from bronze, which I like. Is a historic reference to just traditional, sculpting materials. And I just like the use of line, and then I had to put some color in it, of course, and try that out. And I was using dressmaker pens for a series of projects, and I thought, how many of them can I get? How much density can you achieve with these tiny little lines? In fact, I remember from art school, one of my technical projects was to do 4 drawings with different types of line. It's crosshatch, parallel, and it's with a rapidograph, and dots. And so, it's a harkening back.
And is that glued together?
Oh, no, the pens are glued together.
The pins are glued together.
Everything else is a high temp silver solder.
Okay. And the X-Acto?
The X-Acto knife is I've done 2. I often look at tools that I use with some interest, and I have another box which is a homage to the X-Acto knife, and it's an environment. And this time I've done one for the pencil as well. This time the X-Acto knife is hurting itself. So. I thought it it's such a useful tool, but maybe it doesn't feel itself so useful.
Right. Yeah, no, I really, with the background in architecture, I have an affinity for that piece because it reminds me of all the model making that I used to do in school, and I had this love-hate relationship with that tool because it was like cutting my fingers all the time. So
it rolls off the table.
Your feet, and you're like, and this, almost every show that I've seen you do, you have a box.
I love a box. I tried to sort of figure this out, but when I was a kid, I would build these little boxes of Lego. And then it'd just be partitions, and I would put my stuff in it. Sort and categorize. And we lived in London for 5 years when I was a kid, and I used to, on the way to choir practice, I used to go by the British Museum every Thursday. And I really loved the sort of Victorian hall of, I don't know what it was called specifically, but it's where they kept bringing back things from around the world, and they categorized it, and they put it in boxes, and it was all of this taxonomy of everything on Earth, and everything was classified and labeled and given a name, and I always loved that. So I have this need to put things. It also, I think it's making order from chaos. You know? It's how you understand the world. But I love a box and I love a puzzle. And these are a set of 12 rings, and each one comes out, and it can be worn.
Oh my gosh!
So you have, and then they all sort of fit together. And they were really fun to make. You know, obsessive drilling of holes. My process is pretty obsessive in almost everything I do.
And what's wonderful is it also reminds me of the last solo show you did with us. You had a jewelry box that wasn't really a box. It was really a tower of bracelets.
Yes.
And this harkens back to that as well, because it was a stack of bracelets that you pulled apart and you could wear. And so it no longer was a box. Once you pulled it apart, you could wear one of the bracelets, or they were a whole bunch of,
Well, also as a jeweler, it's when somebody buys a piece of jewelry, and if they're not wearing it, it usually gets thrown in a drawer. And so it's nice to have an object that you can wear and you can look at and enjoy in a second way. Which I think is nice. So I've created, I call these jewelry boxes, and there's been, I think I'm up to 12 different forms of jewelry in boxes, but not in a traditional jewelry box.
Right. I love that. It's a jewelry box, but not really. Don't open it. It doesn't open. It's like there's no opening to this box. I love this piece. And it also, I'm going to just point out, also the other tie to the last show that you had with me was the last show was called Holding Patterns. And it was about sort of this idea of looking down on terrain. And there were a whole bunch of pieces that were made out of cardboard and various computer elements, and that made almost like this topograph map. And I see a lot of that reference in here.
It's like fields.
It's like a lot of that same kind of feeling looking down. And so you've called it aerial landscape, right? And so it's got that. But I looked at it and I was like, oh my gosh, this is also harkening back to that. The cardboard work that you were doing, but in a different material.
It's funny how it all,
repeats.
You don't always think. Some of it's subconscious.
So now we're to the sins.
Okay, so now we're to the 7 deadly sins. They've always sort of fascinated me. I had created them once before in cutlery forms, and I thought, well, how can you do this in a more minimal way? I actually had this project in my mind for probably 10 years. And sort of a minimal representation of an intangible. I had a series a while ago called think of it.
Okay.
But they were tools for intangible processes, and so I like the idea. There's a bit of a challenge in how to represent an intangible with an object. So this is pride. It's perfect, straight, proud. This is anger erupting. This is sloth. It's not a very cared for cube. This one's lust, has a little protuberance. This is gluttony, it's sort of swelling. Avarice is sort of drawing things in to itself. And envy, I thought, was the most challenged one. And envy is a cube that's trying to be not what it is, something else. And it's also reflecting of it's the outside world of what it wants to be, what it's envious of. So I really, not only did I enjoy the physical process of making a hollow constructed cube is sort of a tough thing to make, and but the conceptual ideas behind each one of those, I enjoyed the challenge of coming up with
the idea of how do you show wrath or anger? They're brilliant. I love it. And then this guy, so anybody who, I have a fantastic photo of Edward wearing this piece, and so anybody who wants to see that, it's on my website, on the gallery website. So it's a neck piece, or so it's. I've been tempted to put it on, but I'm too afraid I'll slice my neck to pieces.
It's a little sharp. So it's from the biblical story of Salome and John the Baptist, and I have this silver platter, and it's the head on a silver platter, and it looks great with your head on the silver platter. It looks
fantastic.
But it's I'm gonna pick it's a found silver object that it's been cut apart and hinged and articulated, and I guess I could.
You could put it on for us. That would be awesome.
Could.
Don't slice yourself. Oh my God.
I won't slice myself. So it's challenging, but it's doable. Right?
Now I have to be brave and try it.
Right.
That's awesome.
But it's it's just a representation of that story.
And what drove you to create this piece?
What drove me to create that piece? I don't know. The pun, my head on a silver platter. I could. I had the materials. I like an engineering technical problem, so slicing it up and hooking it all back together again, threading all of these stones are threaded, and they hold the screws that actually they're the nuts for the mechanisms. So I sort of enjoy that, but
the challenge of figuring out how to put it together and how to make it look nice once you did that.
Yeah.
That's great. I love this. So one more sin, it's back in this other corner. It's something you created for, and I'm going to stand out of the way so David can get in the corner. You can get in the corner. But it's something you created for our end of the year show last year. We did a show that we asked artists to create a piece that represented 2020 to them or was influenced by 2020. And you created this piece, and we've decided to include it in the show because, we didn't have many people in the gallery after last year, at the end of last year. So tell us about the piece and the inspiration and all that.
So the piece is taken from a quote from Hamlet that says, "By the pricking of my thumbs, something wicked this way comes." And I had this form sitting on my bench for years. It's an electroformed Beaudark apple from an Osage orange tree. So an electroforming, which is a complicated process, but you put conductive paint on an object and you put it in a bath with copper plates, and you run a current through it, and the copper is deposited on the object, and then you put it in a kiln, you burn the organic object out of the form. And so anyway, I love this sort of bumpy form, and it literally has been sitting there for 15 years, and it looked like a coronavirus, to me. And then I had a friend who collected these honey locust thorns on a farm, because I just said I would love to use those in a project someday. So she collected them and gave them to me. And so it became this ritual object of this chalice, this communion object, but it's negated our ability to commune with one another, like the pandemic has. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a very successful object.
Absolutely. Well, it won an award.
It did. But so that's the first piece that came out of the pandemic for me, really. I don't know how much I want to deal with the pandemic as a subject.
Right.
Not there yet. It may happen later. But it actually sort of propelled the rest of this.
Mm-hmm. It allowed you to break me up.
Yeah. The pandemic gave me what I thought I was always going to want, which was more time alone in my studio. And that was great for about 2 months. I was in heaven making. And then it got a little old. And then, you kind of look at what you do and you think, what's the meaning? What's the purpose? This seems frivolous. I wish I was an immunologist. It would make more, I could be more helpful to the world. And you sort of take a dive for a while. And it took me a while to wind back up. I did a lot of, house cleaning projects of organizing files and photos and, things like that were time-sucking and occupying things. But, when creativity is something that you enjoy so much and you can't do it, it's bad. And I literally, the pandemic was the first time I've ever experienced that in my life, where I didn't feel the ability to create. Yeah.
Gosh. Well, here you are. You made it. Let's end on a happier note.
Okay.
So we got color.
Okay.
Back to color, and then we're going to wrap it up. But so these are paper pieces that I think often in photograph people don't grasp that. They just think that they're spirals of color or whatever. But in real life, you can see that there's depth here. That these are actually three-dimensional elements that are quilled paper. Would you still call it quilt? Even on this scale?
Large.
Yeah, large version. You in our last show, you did a quilt piece years ago that was a whole bunch of small quills put together. Yeah. So this is taking the opposite effect of just doing one big quilt in an artwork,
right?
So how do you make a decision on color? How do you approach these?
Okay, so I've been working with color and line. I consider these collages, and I'm sort of obsessed with the edges of things. The edge of color, the edge of a piece of paper, the edges of cardboard and different textures you can get with them. And I first started doing these in vertical lines, and then I started doing them in tiny little coils, in small formats, and then they grew into a very large format, which I didn't think I'd ever be able to finish because there were tiny little coils of paper in a very large format. And this is just it's another iteration of the small quill writ large. I sit down and I think of a color palette. I want to do green, I want to do reds, and then I sit down and I think of some colors that I want to go within them. There's actually sort of there's a process in the arrangement of color in the green ones and the red ones. So this is red. This is red with like 5 different colors. This is with white as the background. This one is the same red with 5 different colors and the black background. So this becomes a shade, this becomes a tint, these are hues, and they're the same colors except for the black and the white. It's just their arrangement is different, but their arrangement's actually somewhat similar in the structure from what color transfers from one to another. But they look completely different.
Yeah.
And so I do a little diagram of what colors I'm going to use and how they're going to.
And you've done this in most of the series of the paper pieces that you've done. You've done this idea of hue and tint and shade. Yeah. And because I've noticed that as well. You like to work in series.
Yeah.
And then there's usually one that's got a white mixed in. There's usually one that's got a black mixed in.
Well, it gives you your tones.
Yeah.
And so it's painting with paper. I mean, if you're asked to mix paint, you mix with black and white and.
But it's funny because most people don't notice it, right?
Right.
Once you point it out, people will see it. But it's not something that somebody goes, oh, that's got white in it, and that one doesn't, or that's got black in it, and that one doesn't. It's like your eyes picking up these visual differences of these pieces, and not the individual elements of it.
And it's so interesting because there's no mixed color there. The colors are the same. but you're seeing them that way. Yeah, fascinating.
Okay, we're going to open it up to some questions. Anybody have any questions for Edward? Yeah.
It seems like, you talk about color and form a lot, but it seems like light is actually a big component of your work.
Very well. It's interesting. When I first started doing my work photographed, I had a wonderful photographer, and he was doing art photography for artists in his retirement for fun. And he always would say, "We're not photographing an object; we're photographing light." And what you see is a reflection back of wavelengths of light. If you want to get real technical about it, you're seeing the reflected light back. So yes, light is very much a part of the way I think of things, and how things look when lit or in natural light.
Edward, these are making me think of some very small embroidered pieces that you made maybe 30 years ago.
Wow.
Do you feel that?
I wouldn't say consciously, but there are things that the circle, the rough circular neck piece I sort of make over and over in different forms. I did some needlework in a show years ago, and but it could be. I guess.
These are like tiny. I have one. They're 2 or 3 inches square, and they're framed in a series, and there were gradations of yarn making shape.
Yes, I remember.
So 2 strands of red and a black or whatever it was.
So that's the same as the paper. It's splitting yarns and adding a different colored yarn to it. And so apparently I've been doing it for longer than I thought.
You were doing it before you met Carlos Garcia. You just didn't know. You just didn't know.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah, because those would have been, you had them when you came back to Houston in whatever, 94 or 5.
Yeah.
Wow. Anything else? Anybody else?
So Edward, when you were telling us how you make these, there was a very planned, controlled process.
Yeah.
When you made this, was that the same, or is it piece by piece?
Piece by piece.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of planning if you have similar colored pieces and you don't want them all clumped in one space, right? So I basically made a chain. And then I went back and added things to the first chain. And I liked the way that looked. And then I made the second chain and started adding things as I made the chain itself. And then sort of stacking up parts in color so that I'm not using too many of one and too many of another. So there's sort of a spreading it out type thing while I'm making it. And then I went back once it was sort of fully constructed and filled in where things needed to, be changed.
But you did the parts first, and then you put them together.
Yes.
Boxes of parts.
Yeah.
You ever go to a studio? It's his organizing, but he's got stuff. There's all sorts of different things to create with, right?
Yep. And it's not all seen. A lot of it's in bins and cupboards.
Yeah, it's organized.
You have to be organized.
Yeah. Yeah, I have a tendency to give Edward things that I have a whole bunch of, and I'm like, I don't want to throw this stuff away. Surely Edward can do something with it. And he's like,
People
I don't know.
do that to me all the time.
Surely you need these, Edward.
Somebody gave me the tips of USB sticks. You know, the little plastic cover. I have a bag of like 300 of them.
Oh my God.
Like,
One day you'll figure
out
where this belongs.
They sit there,
Well, we're going to wrap it up there. Thank you, Edward, for coming and spending time with us today. And thank everybody else for watching. Please check out the photos online, and if you're seeing this while the exhibit's still up, please come by the gallery and see us in person. All right. Thank you guys.